Monica, good morning. It's a pleasure to host you today and to be able to listen your knowledge about REACH. I know Monica for many years from my previous professional project in which I was in charge of a product called azodicarbonamide, and we were my previous company, we were the lead resistant of this product, and unfortunately this product has been selected in the past to be member of the so-called SVHC list. That means substance of very high concern, and for this reason we created a kind of let's say lobby advocacy group in order to defend this product in front of ESHA, REACH authority, either at DG Industry, DG Employment, and DG Environment. No, and we have been very active during many years in promoting, I would say, consolidated scientific information in order to defend the product. And I can say that we have been quite successful, because at the end, this product was one of the first selected to be in SVHC list. That means, in theory, it should be already in authorization list, and we could stop twice the inclusion of this product in the SVHC list. That means that we did a great job. And basically because Monica and her colleague at the REACH Mastery, they were very cooperative and helping a lot about that. So Monica knows very well all about REACH, and I think today she will explain us many details, possibly about the expected, let's say, REACH law, I don't know how to say, update or renewal that is supposed to be soon published, but I heard that since almost 3-4 years, so maybe Monica knows more to tell us. And then we will focus on polymers, which is the topic of today. So again, Monica, thank you for accepting to participate and to explain us all what you know about the polymers and the so-called REACH update. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you very much, Mark, for your very good presentation of me. And good morning to everybody. I will share my screen, so you have to confirm then when you see the presentation. If you see the presentation, you see the presentation now? Okay, so good. Good morning to everybody. Yes, today we will talk about the REACH update and one of the updates that will really impact the industry, that is the update on polymers. And it's really something that will be very challenging for the industry. So I try to explain what's happening, what will happen, and how we can prepare in all part of the industry as producer and as users. So Mastery is my consultancy company, and we are dealing with REACH since many years. And for polymers, we are cooperating in two consultancy companies, so Calvert Consulting and Team Mastery. We cooperated a lot in big consortia all around Europe. So also in this big project, we will cooperate together, dealing with both technical, administrative, and many kind of projects. So therefore, you will see almost always the two logos of the two companies together. So what we talk about today, I will make a short introduction about the status of the art of the legislation. Then we will talk a lot about the first step that will be, for the time being, the most impacting step. That's the notification of polymers. Then I will spend some words describing what we are doing as practical project in order to help industry in preparing themselves, but also up until the end of the process, and what can be the first action, very important to take starting from now. So legislation first. And the reason why we are here today is, again, the fact that REACH regulation will be updated soon. And part of the update will be the registration of polymers. That will be a much bigger burden than the registration of substances. For this reason, you will see during the presentation that this step will involve much more preliminary work than the registration of substances. Much work both from the administrative side and from the technical part, because we need to perform a lot of tasks. But between that, we also need to develop new analytical methods, new approach on toxicological tests, because polymers are very special substances. And we need to start and train people, structure, laboratories, find experts, because we can say that from a regulatory point of view for Europe is news, because Europe always stay a bit away from polymers. They are not even in the ANEX list, so they were exempted up to now from any consideration. Therefore, we have to stay updated starting now and prepare ourselves in advance. So I was saying that polymers have always been exempted in Europe from almost anything, and above all, for the time being, they are exempted from the registration, and also from Title VI, information on the supply chain. What's a polymer? The definition of a polymer is a substance characterized by molecule which have a sequence of one or more monomer units. They have to answer to two characteristics. For one, they have to be distributed. So they are UVCB substances distributed over a range of molecular weight. And that is changing based on the difference on the number of monomer units. And we need to have at least repetition of 3 monomer units in the chain. What happened in the previous regulatory framework, registration of substances, obviously the industry tried to be exempted as much as possible. So there are many borderline situations in which up to now, some molecules are defined as polymer. Maybe it will be a case to consider if continuing in considering them a polymer or not. So it can be that registration now of the substance considered as polymer could be a burden higher than considering a substance. So it has to be really revised, the approach for the whole registration issue in the industry. So what happened from a legislative point of view, from the technical point of view? There is not so much news since last year, even if many groups worked in the last 3-4 years, many dates postponed, many technical work. The last update now is that on the 18th of October, the European Commission has adopted the 2023 Work Programme, which put the REACH revision in the last quarter of 2023. It means this year. We had to keep in mind what happens in the legislative course. So this is a proposal, like it was the REACH proposal in 2003. So we will have a draft of the regulation. Then this draft will be discussed between authorities, between the Commission, between stakeholders and public, commented. And usually the adoption of the legal text will happen in the time frame of 2-3 years. So we expect that starting from the proposal, the adoption can be set in 2025, 2026. And the first step that will be the notification can be forecasted in 2027. So if we see the dates, just we can say, oh, it's 5 years before the reality, before the real burden, and it seems far away, but it is not. You will see, first of all, that time flies, and that the number of things to perform before the notification, the first step, are a lot. They are difficult and complex, so it's important to follow the process starting from now. So notification. The first step is notification, and for companies which follow the REACH regulation, it seems that is like the pre-registration step. But the fact is that it will be very different, because the pre-registration step was a step that put the industry in a phasing period, setting deadlines, and identified substances to be registered and groups and CEP to be formed. In this case, the notification will be different because it will imply notification of all polymers produced and imported, and unrespected if the polymers are subject or not subject to registration and any characteristics, because the scope will be for regulatory bodies, for ECA, for the Commission to understand which is the situation of all polymers into the market, in the production, and to adapt the system to a reality that they don't know. For this reason, they want to know everything. So first of all, the scope of the notification will be to distinguish between polymer requirement registration and polymer not requirement registration. So they proposed a decisional tree and a number of criteria to follow, some easy, some complex, in order to make this decision. And what's important is that most probably notification will include also polymers produced or imported below 1 ton, also polymer for R&D polymers, PPRD, any kind of dangerous, not dangerous. So for this reason, the notification step will be a very important and impacting one. So we will have a look to the tree, and you see many steps. Some led to polymer non requiring registration, but most of them will lead to the red part, polymer requiring registration. And any of those criteria have to be evaluated. So you have really to pass through the tree in all the steps, all the voices, almost always. And this is what we are doing now together. So to pass through all the steps to understand what they mean and the impact. So we start. The first step is a step considering precursors. So we know that in the polymer industry, very often we prepare pre-polymers in order to have a subsequent further polymerization. So in one way, they will be considered as intermediates. So we know that also in the REACH regulation, anytime something is produced to then be further transformed before entering into an article, it can be considered an intermediate. In the case of polymers, it's called precursor, and it can be considered exempt, non-subject to registration. But obviously there is a but, or there are two. One is that this step has to be controlled in strictly controlled condition, no exposure for the worker, no exposure for the environment. It will be very difficult in the world of polymer to consider a propolymer really treated instead called control condition. And another situation, uncommon maybe in substances, is that we had many cases in which the pre-polymer enter in the formation of the final polymer at the same time of the formation of an article. So there's an issue in what step we have to consider as intermediate, as a final polymer, which will be the real responsible for registration or not. So obviously guidelines are not yet published. This is just the first idea. And when we consider our product range, for the time being, we have to be conservative and consider intermediate and precursors really when they are precursors that then finally go for a final polymerization as such. The second step is regards polyesters. This also is a good step because in the case of polyesters, they are considered polymer of low concern and basically safe, basically not requiring registration. And also in this case, there's a big but, because the polyesters have to be composed from monomers, which are all in a specific list. So in the regulation, a list, an annex will be published with a list of monomers. So if our polyester is composed by those monomers, then we can consider it as exempted and we don't go forward in our tree. If just one monomer is not in the list, then it's subject to registration. The list, there is a basic list you can find in the Australian website under the section of polymer of low concern. It's a list of the most common monomers used up to now. You can already compare your polymer with this list. This list will for sure not remain the same. Some monomers will be removed, some monomers will be added, but most common are there. So a first evaluation can be already made against this list. Then we start with the heavy criteria, the criteria which led to registration. A big discussion has been made on fluorinated polymers. So several decisions were taken and removed. At the end, in the last meeting held by the technical meeting, almost all stakeholders agreed in having all fluorinated polymers included and subject to registration, regardless of whether the fluorine is attached to the carbon backbone or in the fluorinated side chain, molecular weight, any characteristics. So as a first shot, anytime you have a fluorinated polymers, it's considered subject to registration. Next step, cationic polymers. So cationic polymers are considered dangerous. They will be subject to registration independently on molecular weight, any other characteristics. And like, for example, we have cationic flocculants quaternary salts, any kind of positive charge we have in the polymer. What we have to take into account is that not only cationic polymers as such are considered, but also polymers that can be expected to become cationic in a natural environment. It's the case, for example, of some tertiary amines that are produced as such, not as whole, not cationic in themselves, but since they will act as cationic in the environment, natural environment, they will be subject to registration as well. Then we can say the biggest cutoff criterion for all the other kind of polymers is the molecular weight. Molecular weight is really driving not only this decision, but also you will see grouping decision, physical property, toxicological properties, and maybe take in mind maybe also deadlines. So you will see here 3 different criteria, but the last 2 are for this scope included in just one. So we have the first criterion is the threshold of 1000 Dalton. So if you have a polymer which molecular weight is below 1000 Dalton, then no way you're subject to registration. But the problem is if we think to be on the safe side and have a polymer with a high molecular weight, and this is the case in many polymers, that it's higher than 1000 Dalton. In that case, you have to perform some more in-depth analytics because there is a limitation based on the content of oligomers within this molecular chain. The criteria is based on low molecular weight oligomers. If you have more than 2% of oligomers with molecular weight lower than 500 Dalton and more than 5% of oligomers with molecular weight less than 1000 Dalton, then even if you have a high molecular weight, then it is subject to registration. The consequence is that even for the notification step, you have to provide a GPC or to perform, if not provide the GPC, to be sure if you're exempted or not. And the GPC that is not the one you perform up to now, just to decide if it's polymer or not, but also to measure the content and the molecular weight of the oligomers with low molecular weight, 500 and 1000. The next one is the hazard criterion. It seems an easy criterion. We all know that for some polymers, there is a harmonized classification. So we can see an official one. Classification in the 12 hazard classes we know, so it can be also for skin and eye irritation or corrosion, acute toxicity, then the most heavy like CMR, dangerous for the environment. So any of those hazard classes is a trick point, an input for considering the polymer as subject to registration. We have 2 considerations to be made. The one is and concerns the fact that the update of the REACH is not simply the update regarding polymers. The REACH will be updated in many parts according to the Green Deal requirements. So also the annex for substances will be updated. Also, the CLP at the same time, the connection with classification, and the Commission is discussing right now new hazard classes that will be under adoption. So they want to put the new hazard classes and to make them official of the endocrine disruptor activity, PBT, BPVB, but also PMT, so not only bioaccumulative and persistent, but also persistent and mobile. So we will need to deal also with those hazard classes also for polymer, because the two processes will be and will run at the same time. Another big question can be made at that point. We know that the harmonized classification is effective not for so many polymers. So we have lots of polymers that are classified just because to be safe on the safe side, some data are existing. So the question is what we do about the polymer that are not harmonized in their classification. This is a bit on the responsibility of the industry, because the concept is that if you don't really have data and you just classify it based on a precautionary approach, then you can still consider it as not classified until you don't have data. But it's like your responsibility to establish this part in agreement. So in all those doubtful cases to decide possibly together if consider it classified or not, and then subject to classification and to registration or not. Oh, the next one. The next one is one of the most difficult criterion to deal with. Is the criterion of the functional group of concern. So polymers have a lot of functional groups, organic groups, reactive groups. They are fundamental. They are really put in the molecular chain to make the polymer work from an applicative point of view, grafting, react, anything. So all the reactive group within a molecule will be classified in three classes of concern. We will have low concern groups, medium, and high. So we see for low concern carboxylic esters and acids, ethers, alcohol, aliphatic alcohol, urethanes. So in most of the cases, we have our molecular chain composed of low concern reactive groups. And so in that case, the polymer can be exempted from registration. But what happens if we have reactive groups of medium or high concern? So let's have a look. In medium concern, we have silanes, epoxide, isocyanate, phenolic, hydroxyl groups, and aldehydes. Maybe I already said that. So groups that we commonly can find in the molecular chain. And for your sector, be careful. In high concern, we have acrylates, methacrylates, hydrazine, toxic silanes, a lot of reactive groups that are of concern and commonly found in paints, varnishes, plastics. So in that case, we had to make calculations. Make the calculation of a parameter, of a new parameter that is called functional group equivalent weight. So just to understand the concept is like not to considering the molecular weight in general, like we did before, just a GPC, but to consider the molecular weight of the monoreactive part of the molecule. So the concept is that the lower is this equivalent weight, the highest is the concern. So we will have some triggering equivalent weight of 1,000 and 5,000. I didn't report here, just not to be sure that will be the final trigger we will have to deal with. And to get that molecular weight, equivalent weight, we have to perform calculation that can be different depending on where the groups are located in the molecular chain. If they are just terminal groups, so we have just to define the whole molecular weight by 2, by the number of terminal groups. but different equation, a different calculation has to be made if they're just within the chain. A different one again if we have a branch molecule, and again different in the case we have several and different reactive group within the molecule. So this is a really complicated task because you have to know really not only the molecular weight of the polymer, but the identity, the exact quantity of the reactive monomers, the reaction process, the constitution of your polymer in any details. So, you know, if you are a producer, maybe you have in mind really the formulation in each detail, but if you are importing a polymer, it's very difficult that the supplier will really share this information with you. That is usually a very confidential part of the whole industry world. So the impact of having to provide those calculations is really high. Then next criteria is again, well, this is in theory an easy one, is the surfactant criterion. So in case your polymer is a surfactant, then it's subject to registration. Surface property is considered at a slightly, well, at a different threshold than the one for substances. If you know, for substances, anything that is different from 60 millinewton is considered surfactant. For polymers, the threshold is lower. So you have to consider a polymer as surfactant if the surface tension is less than 45 millinewton meter. That's good from one side. On the other side, you can imagine you have to measure the surface property of the polymer. And you measure before the notification step. In some cases, it will be an easy task because usually surfactant has also soluble polymers. But in many cases, the task and the difficult task is to deal with polymers that are not completely soluble. So from a practical point of view, it could be not an easy task to perform. Finally, this is the last step of the tree, and is the degradation criterion. And these two will be a small nightmare if all the other nightmares up to now were not enough, because the criterion says that its polymer is designed or can be expected to substantially degrade or decompose or depolymerize in substances that have one or more of the heads of classification listed above, then it's subject to registration. You know, up to now, degradation was a good thing, that we were looking for polymers because it means that we have no concern of persistency, many application fields, then the nanoparticles, microplastics, all those important things and project for Europe was more light in case of biodegradability of the polymers. But in this case, you have to understand what your degradation process can produce, identify the degradation products, and believe me, we are dealing with this task for UVB substances just right now for many compliance check, and it's quite impossible to identify all concern, all component. There is no test that can really give an easy answer at a reasonable price. So it will be, again, difficult to identify which cases will be really triggering those criteria or not. and which will be the test also to establish when we have to apply the criterion or not. So because they are not talking of the simple ready biodegradation test. So OECD series 301 that we have applied as a screening for substances. So they are considering other potential degradation tests more connected to the polymer and plastic methods, packaging methods. So we hope that the regulatory bodies will be reasonable on that point and try not to stress too much on this criterion. And I can say last of the headache for the time being, before the next one, is that we have to run all the three to make the decision. But between the information we have to provide during notification, we not only have to state if it's subject to registration or not, which is the criterion applied, the analytical performed to get to the criterion, but we also have to identify the residual monomer content. So together with the GPC and calculations and molecular weight, we will need to find the most applicable method, maybe HPLC mostly, in order to identify and make the quantification of the residual monomer content. So if you follow me up to now, you can understand that in all cases, even if you have to register or not, everyone needs to have a number of specific analytical information on all your polymers. And we will see in the next slide, also even some physical test, the property tested. So we saw surface tension, but most probably we will need others in order to be able to make the notification step. So just to focus on the plastic boards, some highlights. You have seen polyester's board, maybe it's the safest one up to now, but you have to be careful in all the special monomers that will not be in the list. You see polyurethanes, urethanes groups are of low concern, but you have to deal with the Romanian reactive isocyanates group when you leave them free to react further. Polyacrylates, be careful, they are within the high concern groups, so you will need to really calculate the equivalent weight to see what happens. The epoxy resins, will they be considered intermediates or not in the term of strict control conditions? So you see, in my opinion, plastics means polymers, and the world of plastics is impacted a lot by this new incoming regulation. And this was the first part, because the biggest question is that how we will call our polymers in order to perform the notification. How we can consider that I have the same polymer as you, that has a slightly different one, which you who are my competitor, can we be on the same table? Can we notify the same polymer or not? Can we make group to build the same registration dossier in the future? So which is the name? The CAS name or the UPAC name are not always existing, are not enough, will not be mandatory, may be useful to make some groups, for sure not enough. So we will see in the following slides which will be the criteria to consider that two polymers are the same. So the first criteria is what is called the rule of 2%, the monomer rule of 2%. So what makes two polymers the same are just the list of monomers that constitute a polymer when they impact more than 2% in the constitution of the molecular chain. So you can see that the list of the same monomer can produce, and you well know that can produce very different polymers that have to be distinguished, that they cannot be really put in the same pot. So you will have to consider also, for sure, the molecular weight, for sure, how the functional group are distributed, so the equivalent weight, and the reaction type that led to different equivalent weight. So the new name we will need to provide to ECHA in order to make the notification, we will have the following form. You see here an example. So you see that, for example, we have polymerization products of hexamethylene diisocyanate with 2-ethyloxyethanol and lophanate. So we have the monomers. But then we have to declare the range of molecular weight, for example, between 1,000 and 50,000 Dalton. The nature of the reactive group, isocyanate, for example, which is the basis for the range of equivalent weight that can be from 1,000 to 10,000 Dalton. So we will form initially a big group considering just the monomers and just identifying the big class of polymers with the same name. But within the same name, we have to make some subgroups, some distinction, because based on other characteristics that can be melting point, impact on TOX and eco properties, viscosity, physical, chemical properties, water solubility, or organic solvent solubility, we can identify already in this definition subgroups, maybe in this case, for example, based on molecular weight. So if we divide this big group in 4 groups, then we have 4 different names, selecting the consequences in molecular weight and equivalent weight. You see the different ranges here, and we can define that for some ranges we are in the criteria for registration, and for other ranges we are not. So it's important to define ranges based on that parameter that will identify the different groups, different people who have then to be put on the same table for cooperation in the future. So the concept, the work of identification that has to develop on several parameters now, not just on the class number of a general name, goes together with the concept of grouping. Grouping will be obviously the focus to reduce as much as possible the work on registration. So how to consider to have the same dossier for same substances defined maybe in slightly different ways, and how to read across between similar polymers, similar substances. So it's a step-by-step process. So the process is first of all based on chemical similarity. So as we have said, the monomers, molecular weight, ramification, production process, so all the things we have seen up to now, but it will be not enough, because we have to put in the same pot at the end the substances that will be subject to the same registration dossier. So we need to know in advance physicochemical characteristics that can impact on these differences. And if we know in advance some properties, ecotox, tox, in order to be able to make a tentative first grouping, a tentative proposal of identifiers, and trying to be clear on the market on which will be our real competitor, our real co-registrant, even before the process starts. And this means not only that we have to exchange information, even before the real CEF are formed, test our substances, at least as a screening, at least for analytical identification, to decide which is the best group to assign to our substances, the best name to assign to our polymers. So it means that we have to provide or to perform GPC before the step of notification for molecular weight and oligomers, HPLC for residual monomers, surface tension measurements when we have the doubt of a surfactant property, but also collect many information like viscosity, rheology, log KV, water or solvent solubility, extractable from articles. We didn't talk about that, but it could be one of the parameters to be investigated. So if you have in mind the number of polymers that you are using or importing or producing, you can see how much work is needed in advance in order then to spare money, time, and not be wrong in the approach and made a program that could be financially bearable, financially affordable by your companies. So, and the last part of the presentation, I will show you a tool, software we call DB-Rich Polymers that we developed for the industry already, which have several useful parts, because you have to collect a number of information different from the information you have in-house up to now. And it is quite important to have them structured already in a way that can be useful in the future. So we talk about molecular weight, Phys-Chem, equivalent weight analytics, monomer, formula, criteria, and all those information will be needed for grouping scope, for notification scope. So it's important to consider all of them. So the best thing is to have just one tool that can be useful to store the information in a consistent way, in a useful way, all in one place. This tool needs to have implemented the calculation and to apply the criteria. So when you put all the information you need inside, then you can evaluate in an easy way and apply the right formula to make calculation and have the criteria applied already in the same tool. But the same tool which identify the constitution of monomer, the naming, can be useful also for communication and to form the first pre-group in order to be able to notify in the correct way our polymer. But the same tool can be also useful to directly make the notification step. So once you have all the information inside, stored in place, all the calculation made, and the criteria assigned, all the groups formed and the name assigned, then it's important to have just an exportation tool, so a button to push and to say, okay, this is my range of products. I made all my job in making all the evaluation. Then comes the notification step. I just have to push a button and send the file to ECA, and that's all. And not again open Euclid, learn how to use it, refill 1,000 of fields to make the notification as requested by ECA. I have just 2 slides to just show you how the software we developed works. You see, this is the home page where you see that you have the general administrative information of your polymers, and a number of information has to be put inside, starting from the formulation, I mean, really the receipt of the polymer, the indication of monomer you use, the kind of reaction, and then based on that, within you have already the calculation of the functional group and equivalent weight, the physical you need, the structural info, and you see that in an automatic way, with red and green dots, you see if your polymer is subject to notification or not, and which are all the needing characteristics. And at the end of the process, when all information are inside and the time or notification will come, then all those information are already ready for submission. But the most important part is that before notification, based on all the characteristics, you have to decide which is the name to notify to ECA. And what we believe is that this name needs to be already agreed in pre-existing working group in order to have already a shared idea on which is your competitor, the group in which you are presenting your molecule, which are the preliminary work that you don't need to do anymore, and the strategy you want to follow in the future, and with which company on the same table. So how this thing can be made? This is working in that way. The software is not a commercial tool, will be not sold to companies, but we are already organized a consortium or many consortia. A consortium agreement is ready and will start in June 2023. Which will use this software in which way? Some of the information, just the non-confidential information that you store into the software, so which you are on which monomer you are using, are shared in a confidential way with Calber Consulting. And an external then consultancy company will see which groups can be formed, will put a company together in a preliminary discussion area, maintaining all the confidentiality about your data that will be stored in your company and in your own installation of the software. And we'll just share a few common information in order to start the discussion and be able to decide which name to assign to the polymers. So you see here the context, the presentation will be shared, and if you want to have a look and to try the software, it is available. But what I wanted to communicate, apart showing this very important tool that can be useful, is the fact that all the work of studying your range of substances has to start, and the work of communicating and see which is around you and what happens around you will need to be started already this year. So this is the presentation is not long, and this is the final slide that summarize which are the steps that I believe are important to be taken starting right now. So first of all is to make an inventory. So in your company, even if you use an official tool or you build up your own list, start really listing the polymers you have, listing the monomers that you can identify, identify a range of molecular weight, the reactive group. So be confident with the criteria that I explained to you today in order to prepare the data. That it's a long work that you can really schedule in the next 1, 2, 3 years, not a burden for the industry, but they will be really useful. Some of those information maybe you have within the company, many of those information, if you are just a user or an importer, you have to collect them from your suppliers. In order to make this inventory, you have to schedule some analytics. So identify if you have a GPC in your company, or which are the best laboratories in Europe to perform the analytics, the right one. Start looking if which methods are available by the laboratories to identify your monomers. So for some monomers, there are work already done at the European level. So some laboratories are already specialized, but for most of them, methods have to be developed, standards have to be found, and maybe also synthesized. So it's a long work to prepare all the laboratories and the testing methods to comply just to the notification step. It's important to already have an idea of your criteria and the applicability of the registration or not. To evaluate, to have time to change formula, for example, if you are borderline with the criteria and you have to slightly change the production process to change the molecular weight, to then be successful on the market, taking not too long in making the change being acceptable by the customer, by the application part. So you have to evaluate all these research and development part within the company and evaluate the budget. The budget, because we calculated that for a first screening per molecule, if you have to rely on external laboratories, the tentative range is between 2,000 and 10,000 euros. So to perform HPLC, GPC, all the identification you need. But if you have to multiply this for all the polymers in your range, then it's already an investment starting right now to schedule in the next 3-4 years to arrive at having the process on time and with a very carefully studied investment. Obviously, you understood that it's important to start cooperation. in any case, with your supplier, starting exchanging information, collecting information, but also with competitors, maybe using third party that can grant confidentiality, but putting on the table some information in order to understand really how to move into this mess in the proper way in the next year. So I hope not to have been too quick and to have been clear. So for the moment, I thank you all for your attention. You will see my references here below, so mail and cellular phone. So you can contact us for any question, and also Mark and Letitia for the presentation. And I'm obviously now for you, for your questions and your doubts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica.
Well, maybe we will give you a few minutes to recover and to drink maybe a glass of water. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yes, that's good. We can have a
yeah.
5-minute break.
No, not a break. But I mean, we will not start to send you immediately the question. I mean,
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting presentation and a bit frightening. I mean, when you describe that one polymer can be in fact, let's say, can be according to reach 4 or 5 different type of polymer according to the molecular weight, etc. I was listening to you and I was remembering when we started to prepare the group to register the fatty acid, no? Like, for example, you know, because I was involved many years ago in the registration of zinc stearate, for example, and of course the stearic acid according to the Merck index, and then the industrial available stearic acid is obviously a mixture, and it's so quite different. And we had a so long debate before to be able to create the consortium and to accept that all of us, we will present eventually the same zinc stearate, or whether we would have a different one, etc. No? So, and especially because also at that time, there were at least 3 different processes to produce zinc stearate. So what you have been explaining now, remember me that I think we spent, it was before REACH, it was in 1993, I think there were an Annex 1 in which zinc stearate was selected, and I think we have been struggling and fighting and discussing almost 3 years before to agree what would be the real zinc stearate, no, to or the several type of zinc stearate to present to this Annex 1, and then later on came the REACH law, and fortunately we had the homework done. So I mean, I would fully agree with what you explain, is that yes, the REACH registration update is still to be published at the end of the year, no? Then there will be probably at least 2 years of preparation before the real registration, but the time that several producers, especially for the product coming from third countries, no, the time to agree, etc., may be quite long. So I mean, all the time we have in front of us is long time, but at the same time is short time, especially considering the identification and the possibility to make consortium with people who, at the end of the day, are putting in the market the same type of polymer, or let's say the polymer with the same name that we will be ready to register, no?
Mm.
So I see there are already some small, well,
Yes, there are some.
question answer. So maybe
Yeah.
Laetitia will start to ask.
Yes, we have a question. Is it known the total approximate number of polymers that will require registration on the REACH?
Well, there have been some estimations. So they are talking more or less about the same number of substances, like 300,000 polymers. What I think is that this number is really underestimated. Because in fact, they don't know really the situation on the market, the differences between polymers, how many they really are. So we don't really know if the work are really identifying and really grouping at the end will be set again on the same number or not. But this is the number they're talking about.
How much you say?
300,000.
300,000?
Yeah.
But for example, the substances that has been registered on the REACH were 20.
Yes, therefore
22,000. No?
Yeah, exactly.
So it means they are, let's say, 22 to 300. They are.
There are big step.
Yeah.
I hope that it's wrong, and I hope that the grouping step will be really crucial and having this number really reduced.
Yeah,
but
it's almost 10 times, 12 times more polymer to register than substances.
Yeah, in theory, but yeah, because they just calculate a different combination of all the substances in different way, different production process. But I think it's like the challenge of the industry to be able to group, to exempt. So maybe this is more the number of notifications and then the possibility to have most of them exempted and a lower number of registration than to deal with. Maybe I also didn't really describe nothing on the registration, but I can also tell you that the registration dossier will also change in the requirements based on the molecular weight, level of concern. It means that for some polymers, just a screening dossier will be presented instead of the full real dossier. So we will see, I mean, how they will implement that step. What it's clear is that they expect a very complicated way of rationalization of the whole process based on the different characteristics of the polymers.
Thank you. We have a comment from Maria, and she says, I have some doubts concerning when is going to be any news from each rate authorities about this new regulation and supervisions to officially start managing the investigation of the different polymers.
Yes. Yeah, there is some doubt, in fact, because what happened is that for 2 years, so we can say 21, half of 22, all authorities worked a lot in this respect. So they were meeting regularly once a month in order to define the criteria that I showed you today. The last official communication you have seen is for October 2022, and we have no news this year on what they are really doing. So there is still doubt on the fact that really the deadline, so officially scheduled of end of this year, will be again respected. So we are waiting for some effective and official declaration, and everybody has some doubts. So when officially start managing this investigation, how I said, it is useful to start the process in any case, because we know for sure that the process will go on. I mean, it's part of a Green Deal. Too much is at stake for Europe in order to respect the Green Deal, and this process will be performed sooner or later. So I think that we can stay, we can say in Italian, we say stay on the window and see what happens still until this summer. I mean, in the next 2-3 months, something official will be published on the real schedule for the authorities for this job. In the meantime, the recommendation is, in any case, to begin and put some order in your product range and in your identification and information.
We have 2 questions about the consortium you have mentioned. Is this consortium private? And if it's possible to know the members list.
Yeah. Okay, so the consortium is private, like all consortia. They are agreements between companies, so regulated by companies themselves, we can say. It is possible to know the member list if you make a pre-consortium agreement that in substance is an NDA. So just to say, I'm interested in following the process and in knowing which are my colleagues in this process. So obviously there are a few companies for the time being that wants to follow the process, want to be in this process. And so you see in the presentation that will be distributed, you see the reference and to have this preliminary NDA agreement in order to get more information.
Thank you. Another question. If our polymer supplier made a notification and the registration if needed, the user is exempt to do it?
Yes, we can say that if the notification step for what they discussed up to now is made in the same logic than the pre-registration and the registration, so made by people or by companies which produce or import. So users are not really involved in the process, even not for communicated anything like users or not, like it was for substances for the time being, even because you have seen the information requested in the notification are strictly technical and based on the composition. So the only thing is that for importers, many users are buying in Europe for most part, but also buying outside Europe for many substances. So like it was for the registration, when the supplier is outside Europe, then it can be in the process with an OR like before, or it can not be in the process or not clearly be in the process. So the users, the importer, have to verify all the information and provide the notification.
One additional question. Monica, about what you just explained now.
Yeah.
In the case of substances, the downstream user were not really involved in the registration process, but at least they had to make sure that their specific application was considered in the registration exposure scenario, no? So
Yeah, but not at this stage. I mean,
at that stage, not yet,
no,
because I
no.
mean, as you can understand, maybe in my company, I have a very specific application for
Yes.
one determined polymer, no?
Yes.
And of course, this polymer can be registered, but eventually not for my specific application. That's why as a downstream user, I should enter and check. I mean, this will be more or less the same than for substances, or it will be quite different?
No. It will be exactly the same because exposure scenario will be part of the registration. So it will be a process that will be made, but is connected to the registration step. So it will start as soon as decision on registration will be made, even before if needed. But I think there is already a lot before. One important thing I can imagine is in some specific case when a specific application requires and has an impact on the knowledge of the polymer, and so to distinguish between other polymers maybe slightly different and establish if it has to be notified separately. So, but I think it's not a common case. So for the time being, downstream users are mainly exempted from the step of providing really information on the uses.
Okay.
So another question, the scope is only for European polymers producers and importers?
Obviously, yes. Happily, it's rich, it's Europe, it's ECA, and it's only for you. Obviously, I mean, you have to take into account non-EU producers just when they come into Europe. And as well, if you remember, like for substances, even if you produce a polymer just for exportation outside EU, then is the production step that it's involved. So the registration and the notification has to be considered as well.
We have another question. What is your opinion regarding the quantitative analysis of polymers with GPC? Will GPC be the method of choice in future? For example, within recent studies?
Yeah, about GPC, there is several problems. Several problems because actually it's a technique, it's a method where calibration is made just on two kinds of polymers, and maybe in some cases also the answer of the method can be not completely reliable for some polymers. So already GPC in itself will need to be developed, further developed in the view of being able to give an answer on all the different polymers that are on the market and in the production overview. It will be not enough. I mean, it will be a good starting point to talk about molecular weight, but exactly as you were imagining, if you have to make residue studies, residues monomers, you need to apply also HPLC or alternative method. So it will not be just the only one, but it's just one of them, even if in some cases it's not even applicable. So in some very special cases, different techniques have to be developed, discovered in order to be able to give a reasonable answer for our polymers.
Mhm. I'd like to make a very simple question, what about the so-called biopolymer or all this kind of, let's say, quite fashionable polymer? No, they're also
Yes.
on focus or not?
Biopolymers. So it's a word of the future. Anything has a bio before makes people happy. But they will be natural. In some cases, they are natural substances. So can be exempted in the same way that natural substances are exempted today from REACH regulation. But there is no discussion. The same concept are applied. And it means that if they are isolated in some special way, even a solvent can be impacting and make them lose the characteristic of be natural. They can be modified, so graft, extended, hydrolyzed. For hydrolyzation, it has this to be discussed, but any chemical modification of natural polymers make them fall into the registration overview and framework. So they will be really considered as natural substances, but in the same criteria that natural substances have been dealt with up to now in the REACH regulation.
Okay.
We have another question. What about if an American company using the USA polymer for the product that is going to be used in Europe as a final product? Do they have this kind of notifications made under the European new guidelines? What do they have to do?
Yes, we have to be clear and be regulatory in understanding what a product means. Because in the REACH regulation, if we talk about product in general, we talk about mixtures and make a difference between mixtures and articles. So in the REACH regulation, you just have 3 levels. So you have substances, and polymer can be a substance. Then you have mixtures, and then you have articles. So registration will concern substances and mixtures. So when you are talking about product which is not yet an article, then it's subject to the REACH registration. So you can say a varnish already sold as a varnish is a product by a mixture, and you have to count all the polymers that are included in that mixture and evaluate each one of them for the quantity, for the constitution. So if I have to give an answer, I will say yes, he has to consider if register as an OR or make the importer register. One important thing is that like the REACH registration of substances, they will need to set deadlines. And what has been discussed a lot is if the deadline will again be on the tonnages like in the previous substance framework or other criteria. And one of the criteria they are considering to apply for deadlines is today molecular weight. So it can be that the registration of polymers will be set in several deadlines in the years after the notification step, not based or based on a combination of both of tonnagement and molecular weight. So this was one of the criteria proposed in a famous report that is called Food Report and discussed between stakeholders and experts. And it had a sense because usually polymers are dealt in biggest quantities than many substances. So it seems that just considering tonnages is not really respecting the priority and a good distribution of the workload over the registering period for the companies and the authorities.
The question says that it is a biopolymer, biodegradable one, the product. So the answer is the same, no?
Yeah, exactly. But it depends on what it means by polymer. So again, if it has been modified in some way chemically, can be subject. There will be the same advantages maybe of the previous regulation of natural substances. So if the modifier could be even registered as an intermediate, but up to now, an imported polymer was already subject to registration for the monomer. So in theory, the modifier part had to be registered. So it's exactly the same. It has to be considered a polymer. It's already defined in the REACH regulation as a substance. So all the main concept of natural substances is applied also for polymer.
Okay. One question of Ramon is asking about what about chemical or chemically recycled polymers? No, notification registration also needed. I guess so, but
I don't know. No, but I mean, this is one thing that was not really discussed, and all the meeting I participate or on the minutes. If I have to think recycled substances, in the case it is demonstrated that are the same constitution of some registered substances, they have not to be registered. But we are talking, the question is well done because we're talking about notification, and we told at the beginning that notification has a different scope for Europe, just to know what's on the market, what's at stake for the time being. It is possible that they want also recycled polymers notified, but it's just an opinion, and I must say that it has not yet been discussed.
Have no more questions. There was another question from Ramon. He wants to know about the intermediates. Regarding polymers produced in Europe, used as intermediate for crafted polymers manufacturing, are those intermediates exempt from notification?
From notification, not. Because you have seen that even if we can consider some precursor as intermediates or intermediates in general as exempt from registration, they will need to be notified as well. So it can be that we can consider them as intermediates or as a precursor, but we will need to notify them with all the characteristics that are requested for notification.
Okay, thank you, Monica. If you have a question, is now the moment to make it. It seems we don't have more questions.
I think that anyway we already addressed a lot of questions, and as you will receive very soon the contact detail of Monica, that I saw them on my I see them on my screen,
On
so I guess
screen,
that
yes.
everybody can have it. But I mean, we will share as soon as possible, no, the PowerPoint and even the recording of this webinar. So please do not hesitate to contact basically Monica, because she's really the expert on this. And if not, you can also contact us at Centro Español del Plástico, and we will try also to help you with your question, no? So I think I see that the people are little by little disconnecting. So I'd like to thank you all the assistants who has still here, and I think we will close this webinar. Thank you very much, Monica. I think it has been very interesting, very useful, and well, unfortunately, you are drafting for us a lot of homework for the near future, especially for the people involved with polymers that until now we are lucky not to be involved with the REACH. But I mean, this is Europe, this is Asia, so we know that every time they will find some new topics to make the industry busy, and then the regulatory expert also busy. So let's continue to address all the requirements of Asia and European Union, and let's try to do it in collaboration with companies, and that's why it's quite good that we can make consortium. So I think it's very important that all of you study more or less who are your competitors and what they are doing, and you can start little by little approaching them. Be careful that there is of course the non-competition law, so sometimes it's important to address that using a CEP subgroup or whatever external consulting company like the one of Monica, and start to prepare yourself for what is coming. No. So thank you very much, and we will keep checking all the events we are preparing from Centro Español del Plástico, especially on the CEP material, because we are also considering during this year to make other type of let's say event or a webinar about polymers and whatever additive. So you can follow us in LinkedIn, or either also to register to receive our newsletter. No, it is well indicated in the web. Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you
Thank
very much.
you.
See you soon in Barcelona, and
For sure. And
a good
I
day.
will keep you updated.
Okay, a good day to all of you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Have a good day. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.